Well, welcome everybody to the webinar on better strategic questions. How to ask better questions before you embark on a strategy discussion. As always, I like to start with a story. The story I want to talk about here really quickly is that when I became a consultant, started practicing as a consultant way back in 2006, I seriously thought that my life's goal was to do strategy consulting and do strategy sessions and help companies figure out, how they could figure out what their mission is and do a vision statement. And I've done a lot of that, but nothing like what I imagined. Because what I found is that the entire process for people in the AV industry is difficult. We're a very jaded audience. We work with corporations and technology and events, and we sit in conference rooms and boardrooms and shareholder meetings, and we listen to speakers talk about strategy. And as soon as you introduce the word strategy, a lot of people just kind of roll their eyes, and then we lose them. I get that. I understand that. So I quickly learned how to frame strategy in different terms and how to make strategy about what you're already doing. And what you're already doing is often good. It's just that you're also doing other things that you shouldn't be. And these are the things that we call noise. So it's been an interesting journey for me as a consultant over all these years to suddenly find out that what I thought I was going to be doing is, well, not it at all. So all right, let me thank our sponsors. Okay, that's vitally important here. These are some folks that have made it possible for me to do a lot of the things that I do. I'm a busy person, but I like to make time for this sort of thing, and these guys make it possible. Nationwide Video has been a client of ours for a number of years and a big supporter, as is AV Stumpel USA, Flex Rental, DWP Live, the great folks at Digital Projection, and Complete Crewing. If you would like to be a sponsor, contact me. I will find time to answer you and show you some ways that you can help support this industry. If you don't know me, I'm Tom Stimson. I'm president of the Stimson Group. There's a few of my ways to find me online. Please visit my website. I'll talk about that later on in the program. We got a lot of Facebook presence as well and lots of YouTube videos, all that kind of good stuff. I should be findable. Which brings us to today's webinar, because you found this and you're taking the time to listen to me today and hopefully learn something and think about your business. What we're going to talk about today is the things that you need to know about yourself and your business before you embark on the quest to clarify your strategy. If we can get a few of these questions out of the way, next month's webinar, we will talk about some of the things that go wrong in strategy, which will set us up for the event after that, where we can get down into more of the meat of the issue. So here's some pre-strategy questions that you need to ask yourself. And remember, feel free to post a question at any time. I will get to them as quickly as I can. So sit back, close your eyes for a second, and think about this question. And this is important. It doesn't matter if you're the owner of the business. It doesn't matter if you're an employee or a senior executive. I hope that at some point in time in any given day that you're happy or satisfied with your business and the work that you do. And think about when you have that feeling and what it is that you're doing when that's going on. What's happening when you're satisfied? What's happening when you feel good about this? The last time I had a real job, I worked at Alford, as many of you know. The times I was happiest was when I was working on a project. There were days where I hopped out of bed. I barely ate breakfast back in those days. I'd get in the car. I wanted to be at my desk by 7 o'clock because there's something I wanted to do. It might be building a spreadsheet, mapping out a process. There's something that I was engaged in that really got me going. It made me feel like I'm doing something useful. And why I was happy and why I could do this were the things that I thought about. So the fact that I had great employees and wonderful people that I worked with that let me do the things, because they did their job well, I could focus on my job mean, that was priceless to me. Very, very important. Another question that you need to think about is, when do you feel frustrated or anxious? And we all have these moments. Frustrated is probably easy to identify. If somebody else doesn't do their job, when I get the phone call that says, "Tom, how do you hold people accountable?" I know I'm dealing with somebody who had a frustrating day. But anxious is probably more pernicious. Frustration we can kind of work through, but anxious, we often don't know what's causing it or what's creating it. So you have to think hard about this. When do you feel frustrated? When do you feel anxious? What's going on? I had a client one time, of course, who always felt anxious looking at his numbers. And it's not that his numbers were terribly bad. We later found out. We found out that he was frustrated and anxious looking at his numbers because he simply didn't understand them, what they meant, and what he was supposed to do with them. He knew they were important, but he didn't know how, and he knew it was his responsibility, and he couldn't fulfill that responsibility, and it made him very anxious. It made him feel a little bit inadequate. And so that was an easy thing to work on, but if he hadn't identified that, if we hadn't figured out that was what was going on, we weren't going to get anywhere on our real goal, which was to figure out what their strategy needed to be. Another question I like to get folks thinking about before they embark on anything to do with strategy is their customers. And I got a couple of questions here about customers, but who are my most loyal customers? And this is a trick question, because a lot of people start thinking about who their best customers are, who their most appreciative customers are, but very often they're not loyal customers. Very often, there's something about them that you like as a customer, but loyalty has a deeper root. Loyalty are the customers who will forgive you a mistake and give you another opportunity and expect you to do the same of them. And very often, you've had them for years, but you don't recognize them for their loyalty. And we want to understand who our loyal customers are, because there's important information there about who we are as an organization. And how does that tie into strategy? Well, we'll learn more about that later, but suffice it to say, you can't have a strategy that isn't based on something that you are. Strategy is not something that we aspire to. Strategy is something that we build from the essence of who we are now. So many of these questions about the now. And then the second question, of course, is what's the most profitable customers? I have a lot of stories about clients telling me about their most profitable customer, and then we found out that that wasn't true. But the one I wanted to share today was a client, and we were doing strategy. We were doing a 2-day strategy session, the old-fashioned, follow this methodology, do these exercises type of strategy. And we got into a discussion about who their best customers were, because we were talking about what's their marketing, what's their marketing strategy going to be. And what we found out was their best customers actually never wrote them a check. Their best customers were actually influencers. They were typically a decision maker or a major influencer, but they weren't the actual customer who wrote them a check. And the net result of this discovery was we had to devise a strategy where the marketing strategy marketed it to people who were never actually going to write them a check. But once we understood that, we were able to clear out a whole lot of noise about how we needed to set up the business. Who did we need to make happy? Who did we have to convince that we were valuable and important? So who are your most profitable customers? And then here's a tough one. What are you really good at? And this is where a lot of us trip up. I think this is probably the thing that I discover most often when I onboard a new client and I start doing my discovery process, is they're not often good at the things that they think they're good at. But they are good at some things that are important and valuable, but they may not respect those things. They may not understand who they're valuable to. So think about what you're really good at, but ultimately, you're going to have to think about what you're really good at in customer terms. So you may be brilliant at detailed drawings and materials takeoffs, but that may not have anything to do with why customers want to do business with you. It may not have anything to do with what makes you valuable, unique in your industry. And then another pre-strategy question, I think this is the last one that I want to consider, is in order to execute a strategy, typically we're going to have to let something go. Strategy is more about what we don't do than what we choose to do. So what are you willing to give up in order to be successful? And here's the standard question, and I ask this of almost every business owner I meet. If you could give up 20% of your revenue, but increase your net profit, would you do it? And everyone says yes. Everybody says yes. What are you willing to give up in order to be more successful? And if you define success by profit, as most owners do, then you would gladly give up revenue in order to be more successful in terms of profit. So think about something that's really valuable in your business, and are you willing to give something up in order to get more of that? So there's some introspection. Now let's get on to some business questions. This is where the fun starts to happen in this process. So we want to ask better strategic questions. I'm going to give you 5 questions. I'm going to help you. I'm going to show you a little bit about what we do with them in the roll up to doing strategy. And I will caution you that there are no wrong answers. And I know how competitive you are. I have met you. I've worked with you for years. I've been in this industry a long time. We're very competitive. So you want to get this right, but you know what? There's nothing to get wrong here. Okay? Strategic questions, there are no wrong answers. They are just answers. There's information that we can use to help guide us moving forward. You ready? Okay. Question number 1. When considering, think about your business, when considering a new opportunity, which of these 2 things matters more to you? So say, for instance, somebody comes to you with an opportunity to say, hey, we'd like you to be, to carry this exclusive line of LED products, or we'd like you to be the sole provider on this major installation project or this live event. When considering a new opportunity, which matters more to you? Do you think about how it will affect my internal business? In other words, what am I going to have to change internally to make this work? Or is the first thing you think of, how will it affect my customers? Both of these answers are correct. There's no wrong answer here. But if you automatically started thinking about how it affects your internal business, that's a piece of information. If you automatically started thinking about your customers, well, my customers wouldn't like that, or that would interfere with other things that I'm doing. So we can now make a quick assessment about whether you're internally focused or customer focused. And it may be to degrees. You may be strongly internally focused and you rarely think about the effect on the customers, or you may think a little bit about the customer and just a little bit more internally, or vice versa. So go with your gut answer. Go with the first thing you thought of, and then we'll look about what we can do with the degrees of commitment to the answer to that question. Question number 2, and we're going to combine these 2 and do something with it. Here's an honest question. How strong is your brand? How strong is your brand? So, 1, do you have to inform new customers, suppliers, or employees about what your company represents? Or do customers raise their expectations based on their first impressions of you? 2 very different ways to think about this. So do you have to educate people about your company, or do people come with expectations or higher expectations based on what they've learned about you? Which one is the most likely answer? And that will tell us a little bit about whether your brand is more to the weak or more to the strong. If you have to inform people about who you are and what you're about, your brand is probably a little bit weak. Your brand should precede you. Okay. If your brand is strong, people will come in with impressions and expectations, and we can improve upon them. So, are you weak or are you strong? Now, honestly, I will say that 90% of the people I talk to believe that their brand is weak. There are a few who have told me that their brand is strong, and sometimes I think they're right. Some brands are stronger than others, but self-awareness about this is important, because here's what we're going to do with this. With an understanding of these two questions about whether you're internally product-focused, product and services-focused, process-focused, internally focused, or you're outwardly focused, customer-focused, and whether you have a weak or strong brand tells us the kind of strategic opportunity that awaits us. It narrows down the playing field that we're going to work in when we start talking about what can you do with strategy. And if your brand is weak and you're product focused, the extreme negative of that is that you're a proposal mill. You're just going to write quotes, you know, everything's undifferentiated, everything's transactional, and that can be frustrating. I can usually see it in somebody's eyes when they realize that, yeah, that's exactly what our problem is. We look internally and we have a weak brand. But there's varying degrees in this, because you're not totally product focused and your brand isn't completely weak. But if you happen to be in a particular quadrant, you can be better at being a company that produces a lot of proposals. And we can develop a strategy that will make you more effective while you are trying to improve either your focus on customers or your focus on brand. But we can make progress with the area that we happen to be in. You know, likewise, if you've got a strong brand, but you're kind of process driven and everything, and the extreme of that is we get customers who keep expecting us to do better, that means that our strategy is probably going to focus around the fit and finish of our delivery, because that's where we have potential strength. So a strategy we can learn from this is, how do we improve upon the strengths that we have? All right, let's move on to question number 3. We're back to picturing your ideal customer now. Think about your ideal customer. You know, what do they look like? Where do they work? What's their job title? How do they treat you? What are their expectations of you? What's your relationship like? And you may have a specific customer in mind, and your ideal customer should hopefully be somebody that you can duplicate, that you can find more people like that. If you're thinking of an ideal customer that's only one person and could never be anyone else, then we need to broaden that into what's the type of position, role, relationship that would be ideal, so that you could have more of them, because we don't want one ideal customer. We want many ideal customers. So picture your ideal customer. Now, put yourself in their shoes. What would they think is an ideal supplier? What is your ideal customer really looking for? And while you're in their shoes, what would they most likely reject? If they could verify something about a supplier that would cause them to reject them, what would that be? So we can think about these things, because goodness knows we don't want to be the bad thing. We don't want to be the rejection, but we may not be everything our ideal customer would like us to be. And this would be a great time to find out. And one of the ways that I might apply this in strategy, and talking about strategy, is understanding all the different places that a customer can come into your organization and partake of your strategy. The different ways that they can come in and experience you. Do they come in at the marketing level? Do they come in at sales? Do they witness your delivery process and become involved that way? So regardless of where a customer comes in, our strategy has to be able to pick them up and carry them forward. And you'd be surprised, they can pop in just about anywhere. Now, question number 4. We're going to look outward again, and I want you to think about your 10 most likely competitors. Now, don't roll your eyes. I know you're not going to write 10 names down right now. You immediately thought of 2. So that's fine. If you only can think of 2 at the moment, that's great. Consider these likely competitors. Now, for the exact same solution at the same price, which of the companies would your target buyer choose? So if your top competitor is XYZ organization and they put together an offer that was identical to yours, same price, same solution. Now I know what you're thinking. Not everybody's ideal. This is an imperfect example because it never actually happens, except that, well, it does. Your customers think this happens all the time. Okay. Which company would your ideal buyer choose, all things being equal? And if they would choose your competitor, that's a useful piece of information that we can use going forward in strategy, because the next question, of course, is why. Why would they choose it? And this is what we do here is we create the definition of a strategic opportunity. If we're going after the same ideal buyer, not only do we have to meet the demand created by our competition, we have to exceed it or replace it. We have to offer a better substitution for those things, because their focus and their brand, all things being equal on a level playing field, are beating you out in your mind in this exercise. So the more time we spend in these types of questions, the better understanding we're going to have about what our strategy needs to accomplish for us. Now, I've asked a couple questions that lead to the idea of branded perception, what people think of you from the outside. I've used this chart before, and it goes back, think back to that 2x2 I showed you a little while ago, where the bottom left-hand side was a proposal mill, and it's based on whether you're inward or outward focused and whether your brand is weak or strong. And then look at this chart. And it works from the bottom up, from undifferentiated value, and the different stages of customer perception about value. The things that they're saying to themselves as they experience you, and where do you want to be? And we don't have to always have branded value to accomplish our goals. And that's something that many small business owners are surprised to learn about. The battle's not always over branding. The battle is over differentiation. But you can't have a strong brand without strong differentiation. So the first thing and the most valuable thing is figure out what the differentiation is going to be, which is the essence of strategy. Strategy is how you're going to create differentiated value. Now, if we can build branding on top of that, then that helps us move up into that top right-hand corner with a strong brand and customer focus. Because well-branded companies are almost singularly focused on their ideal buyer. They're making sure that the brand meets those expectations at all time. Question number 5. All right, think about the owner of your business. If you're the owner, well, then you get to think about yourself. This is a question where we need to be in the owner's shoes. What makes his or her day better? This is not quite the same question I asked at the very beginning, the pre-strategy questions about, what makes you, what helps you love your business? What do you appreciate most? What gives you satisfaction? What makes his or her day better? And what makes his or her day worse? And and trust me, if you're the owner, everybody around you knows. If they're looking down at their hands right now, is because they don't think you know. What makes your day better or what makes your day worse? There's no shame in that. But part of what strategy does is it helps everybody understand why we're doing what we're doing. The way I use this understanding and weave this into the strategy conversation is it's important for us to understand what the owner wants. And if you're a company of shares, in other words, the CEO of the company is not the sole owner, okay, then we have to look at what do the shareholders want. But what do owners want? And most of the companies I deal with, most of the people on the phone call are privately held company. There's an individual with a family and a car and a mortgage and kids and relatives and noise, and they'd like to take a better vacation. They're just humans. They're humans with a different set of problems and a different set of risks because of the choices they've made that put them into an ownership position. And what do they want? And we have to have an open conversation about this, because if we don't address it in strategy, I guarantee the strategy won't succeed. Strategies that run counter or neglect the needs of the owner, the personal needs of the owner, the day-to-day business needs of the owner, if it doesn't address what makes their day better, then it's not going to succeed, it's not going to sustain. These are probably not the questions you were expecting. And I get that, and I'm sure I'll get a couple of emails about that. These are the questions that I wish people would ask before they came and said, Tom, we want to do strategy. Okay, we want to clarify this. We want to have a team. We want to have an off-site team meeting where we talk about the future and make sure that we all agree on stuff. When in fact, the things that we need to agree on were the questions I just asked. So going into a 2-day company meeting where you expect to come out with clarity for the coming year, I think is unrealistic. Now, having said all that, I do it all the time. I go to those meetings all the time. I've got 2 in the next week. Oddly enough, on 2 different continents, but that's another story. It's not that those meetings aren't important. They don't always achieve what we hope them to achieve. And so it's part of my challenge to make the best out of them. Help them get something that will help them move forward and get closer to a strategic intent. Strategy, what it can do for you is it's going to clarify a lot of things. It's going to clarify your marketing and branding and what you want to do and what you don't want to do. Considering that there's a necessary spend for marketing and branding, this is huge. And too often I see people spend too much on the wrong things or not enough on the right things. I reviewed a P&L the other day and I couldn't believe how little their marketing budget was. It's like, what are you guys doing? Well, we're not doing anything. It's like, okay, then why are you asking me how come your sales are down? You're not doing any marketing. It's going to clarify things like pricing. I spent a couple of years talking almost exclusively about pricing in my webinars. At least it seemed that way to me. Pricing is important, and pricing is strategic. How you price things, when you price them that way, how you manage the dynamics of pricing are all strategic. Your target customer is strategic. The sales force that you put out into the field or in front of your customers is strategic. Okay? Now, a salesperson is a tactic. Okay? The type of sales force you have is strategic. How you hire is strategic. I'm working with an organization right now that has a wonderful company culture, and they focus a great deal of energy on branding, marketing, and onboarding, how they bring in new employees and help them understand the culture of the business. And it's just a marvel to look at. Now, that's their strategy. They haven't figured out how to transfer that strategy to the bigger picture of growing the business, but because they have such a devotion to these things, and they've done such a good job of clarifying it, they are getting traction just for the clarity. So cost management, location, hiring, these are all strategic initiatives if we can understand and convey our strategy. And here's the kicker. Here's one of the things that I think most strategies fail on, is that we try and have one strategy for an entire organization. And sure, there is a master strategy. But if you have multiple lines of business, you're going to have multiple strategies. And in the AV industry, this is multiple lines of business is fairly normal. I'm looking at some of the names of the folks who are on the call here today. Many of you are sales and integration companies, but you also have a live events or a rental division. You also do service. I mean, there's multiple things that you do. Some of you do production and do creative. I've got clients who have, I think the most I have is a client that has 7 clear lines of business. And each one of them needs a slightly different strategy with a theme that ties them all together. And if we can clarify that, and if we can express this to our employees, then they can move forward, and that's what is important. Because otherwise, we end up with a whole bunch of ideas with nothing to tie them together. And even an idea that you can complete, which is slightly more valuable than one you can't, but if it has nothing to do with your strategy, why would you do it? So when it comes to task management and the things that we're going to do, I only care about the things that support your goals, which are the things that you actually do. Everything else is noise. The purpose of the strategic discussion is to reduce the noise in your organization so you know what to do, you know how to make decisions, and you know what they're based on. The most valuable word that comes out of strategy is no. And if we exercise no a little bit more diligently, it would save a lot of us a lot of grief. So that's a quick rundown on the strategic questions that we need to ask ourselves. We have to ask better questions. And we have to get these questions out of the way so that we can have a discussion that takes all of these things into account. You have to take into account your ideal customer. You have to take into account who your competition is and what you're trying to accomplish. How are you going to be different from them? Okay? You have to take into account your brand and where can your brand help you and where are you going to have to work harder than your brand is in order for this all to work. Okay? Branding is not strategy, but branding can be a strategy. You understand the difference? All right. So I'm gonna pause right now, remind you to ask some questions. I see a couple of you have made some comments already, so I will get to those in a minute. I want to segue here for a moment and talk about some things that might help you with strategy that are coming up. I'm going to do a bunch more Jumpstart workshops in 2018, and you'd be surprised, but the first one happens to be on strategy. So here's the calendar. Here's the dates. Again, this will be in the handout that you'll be able to download later, but scribble those down because I want you to hold those dates, and I want to explain to you what it is we're trying to do. Strategy, operations, marketing, and management are the 4 areas that I most often work on with business owners and their management teams. Here they are. We've put them together in a package of 4, and it's designed for an owner and their number one, their second in command, whatever you call that person, to come for that particular area. So Jumpstart workshops are, they're very collaborative. We do a lot of exercises. We do a lot of table work. We have a lot of dialogue. You make a lot of new friends. You will have very frank conversations with folks from other companies. And this will be probably the best workshop ever for that because this is a workshop that is for owners. I'm not accepting anybody, any attendees where an owner is not present or a principal, a CEO. So you can bring 2 people. You can bring an optional 3rd person because I know there are a few situations where 2 people is not the right number from a company, but I'm not going to accept any more than 3 people from one company because this is a too many cooks thing. I want the most strategic person and the owner. And then in May, I want the most operational person and the owner. And then I want the marketing person and the owner. And then I want the CFO and the owner in December. We have 2 days of classroom, breakfast, a lovely dinner, lots of networking time, and you're going to get a lot of impact about how to work on your business. So the first one, of course, is on strategy. I do a lot of strategy with my clients. We don't do a formal process because it's usually something we can discover quickly and easily on the way. And most of the strategy is done with me and 2 other people in the room. So this is the process that I'm going to take you and your second in command through in March. And we'll figure out what business you're in and then how are you going to explain that to the rest of your company. So registration for this will begin in January 29th. The discounts trail by the week, so your best price will be in that first week. And trust me, 20% off the price of this is going to be extremely valuable because you're paying for 2 people. And then we'll have full price. If there's any seats left, we'll sell some single seats because there are a few of you who are really sole proprietors. And if there are seats left, I'll make room for you. So to be involved with this one, make sure you're on the mailing list. If you're not getting Intentional Success newsletter, pop over to my website. Oh, by the way, I got a new website. It's been a very busy January. Click on the link to download a free ebook, Learning to Expect Better, which is this book here. You're just going to get the digital download, and that will put you on the mailing list for Intentional Success, which comes every Monday morning, which you're probably already getting because it's probably how you found out about the webinar. But just to be sure that you're getting my emails so that we can get you on the invite list for the workshops. And while you're at my website, pop over on the contact page and schedule a call. If you're ready to start working on your business, if you're ready to get out of just listening to webinars and start actually applying some of these things directly onto your business, give me a call. I can talk to you about coaching programs and some of our retainer engagements to get you the kind of advisory work that'll work best for you. All right, I'm going to get to your questions in just a second. I'm going to again thank our sponsors. Hey, sponsors, appreciate you. And we'll put some questions in here. All right, the first question that came up, and it came up pretty early on. Let me paraphrase here because it's a long one. So Tom, we did strategic planning a year and a half ago. We brought in an outside consultant. So they did the whole strategic planning thing, went off site. And how, blah, 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 blah. Okay, how will coming to your workshop affect, that's a workshop question. How will coming to your workshop affect or interfere with the strategic plan we already have in place? All right, let me turn that back into a webinar question. My theory on strategy is that you already have an existing strategy. You may not be aware of what it is. The purpose of the workshop is to help you understand how to express what your strategic intent is. And we will talk about mission, we'll talk about vision, we'll talk about strategy, and we'll clarify what tactics are appropriate for what you're trying to accomplish. But the real takeaway is a means to better express that to your team. If you can walk back to your team and say, guys, here's our mission in one word. And here's one sentence that explains, why we're in business, how we make money at it. And then here's some of the values we're going to try and preserve. And then here's the unique way we're going to do that. That's what we're going to work on in March. Now, if you've already done some strategic planning, you've laid a lot of the groundwork. But I can tell you from my experience, and I recently started a new client this fall, who when I walked in, the employees, and they were a fun-loving company, but they kept walking up and asking me if I was going to give them a hat. I said, what are you talking about? I finally went to my wife, well, everybody's asking me for a hat. What are they talking about? And he goes, they're just joshing you. They had a consultant come in, and they did strategy, and the consultant really did not make a good impression. He didn't leave a good impression. But one of his gimmicks was he gave everybody a hat with a slogan on it, a baseball cap with, fly like an eagle or soar or something like that on there. And they were all kind of insulted, and they were really put off by the idea of consultants. So we can take the work that you've already done and turn it into something that makes sense in your business term and your business language, get rid of some of the noise, provide some more clarity and build off of that. All right. Another question here. If we can't get the owner, hang on. So what if we can't get the owner to communicate their goals? Is all this a non-starter? Well, here's the challenge. If we can get that owner to come to this workshop, we will get the goals out of them. Okay. I've done a pretty good job over the years, though not always 100% successful in getting owners to express what they're trying to do. The challenge is sometimes they change their minds. Okay? And so sometimes we can be frustrated with our owners in this process. And I know, and it's no secret, back when I had a job, I was often frustrated. I often didn't understand what we're trying to accomplish, and I let that frustration come through. Typically, what I will find out in this process is that the owner's been quite clear. The hearing filter doesn't always work. And so we can find the common ground and the common language. And while we're not going to have a therapy session in a 2-day workshop, we can help identify what the needs are. And if some people need more help, we'll find a way for them to get some more help. So thanks for asking that. I have another question here that's asking me what a mission is. We've had lots of discussions. We have a mission statement and a vision statement, and they look like they're almost the exact same thing. And all right. Well, as I said at the very beginning of all this, when I started my consulting career, I wanted to be a strategy consultant. So I spent a lot of time studying, strategy and developing my own theories of strategic intent. If you find 5 strategy consultants, you're going to probably find about 10 different definitions of mission, vision, and strategy. Very succinctly, and I think I outlined it before, but I'll be a little bit more clear about that. For me, a mission is the thing that gets you up every morning. It may have absolutely nothing to do with business. Matter of fact, the best missions I find are somewhat altruistic. I worked with a company one time who had a very elaborate mission statement, and after working with them, it took 3 days. Their strategy session was 3 days. I got them down to 1 word. And the 1 word was destiny. And what really drove this company, what got them moving, what motivated the owners, and there were 5 owners, by the way, what they all agreed on was what was important for them was to control their destiny. And the decisions that they made in business and how they worked with clients and how they chose and trained employees, everything they did went back to this destiny. So their mission was destiny. So mission is the impossible dream, the thing that you do every day, because you're never going to control your destiny 100%. Okay? But you can keep trying. So mission is the thing that no matter what happens, you keep trying. Vision, to me, has 4 elements. Vision is, why are we in business? How do we make money at it? Who are our customers? And then what are our values? And if you can answer those 4 questions, I find that almost anyone could figure out how to be useful inside of your company. Strategy has to filter through all of these things. You can't have a strategy that contradicts your vision, and you can't have a vision that contradicts your mission. And then tactics are merely the things that we do that make our strategy look smarter. The example I've always used is the Starbucks example. You go into a Starbucks, you go into the store, and they've got tables and chairs and couches and comfy seats and free Wi-Fi and funky music playing, and they call you by your name. All of those are tactics. And those tactics support their strategy, which is brilliant, which is to be the place between where you are and where you're going. Starbucks taught us how to stop on our way somewhere. So all of the tactics that they use, coffee is a tactic, by the way, make that strategy look smarter because it's extremely successful. There's always somebody at a Starbucks. And as somebody who travels for a living, I spend a lot of time stopping in Starbucks because I'm habitually early. So those are the kinds of things that we need to understand about strategy. So I see a lot more comments. These are mostly comments here. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. Let me summarize some things for you, and we'll get you back into your real world. All right. Focus on the company, on being the company that fits you. I'm talking to you, the owner. I'm talking to you, the shareholder. I'm talking to the person, the CEO. You can't drive a vision and a strategy for an organization that is different than who you are. So we have to find out what that is. And since I'm mostly dealing with small business owners, people who own their own companies, is don't try to be somebody else's version of success. You see other companies out there, you admire them, you might even want to copy them, but you have no idea what they gave up to get there. Figure out what your version of success is. Figure out what you're willing to give up, and then we can go for that. A strategic goal that requires you to be something you have never been before requires extraordinary effort and talent. Think about that 2x2 diagram back at the beginning here. If you're in the bottom left-hand quadrant and you set a goal to be in the top right-hand quadrant, I can't tell you that you're going to make it. Okay? If you were going to be that company, you already would be a lot closer. So a strategic goal is incremental. Let's figure out who we want to be in 5 years, and if we get there in 2, then we can pick another 5-year goal. Okay? Don't try and be something that you never can be, because then you're not going to succeed. You're going to get frustrated, and you're going to give up, and you're going to go back to just reacting to whatever comes your way, which is where, frankly, most of my clients start. They've come to me after years of just reacting, and now they got to hire an expensive consultant to help them get out of it. Here's a way that you can avoid that or spend a heck of a lot less money figuring out how to do that. So something worth considering. And let's see, I got another comment slipped in here. It said, I love to see mission, strategy, and tactics in an outline format with real examples to help wrap my head around the order of operations. Thank you. Come to the workshop in March, because it's exactly what we're going to do. It's a lot to get your head around, but I've been teaching mission, vision, strategy, and tactics for years, and while I don't get to do it as often enough, I actually love to do it. So come to that workshop. And when you're there, be prepared to answer the question, what will this strategy lead to? Because when we figure out what your strategy is, the next thing is what's going to happen with it. And if we don't know where it's going to lead to, then we can't follow that strategy. It's a waste of time. We need to follow a strategy and know where it's going to go. We need to take the guesswork out of it, because guessing is what gets us into trouble. So obviously, I've got a lot of passion about this topic, and I know that strategy is not everybody's favorite thing to talk about every single day, but I can't tell you how incredibly important it is in order to have a successful business. Strategy plays into every single client that I work with, whether they thought that's why they were hiring me or not. So it would behoove all of us to pay attention to the things that we can learn about strategy so that we can work on our business much, much more effectively. So thank you all for your time and attention. Do watch your email. I'll send you the link to the video from today, along with the backup slides that go with it. It'll be available for, I think I said 30 days. And then get ready for next month's webinar, when we're going to talk about fantastic strategic failures in AV. And that's going to be a lot of fun, because we're going to learn about how to do some things wrong and have some fun with it, so that we can focus on doing things right. So get back to business. Thanks for your attention. We'll talk to you soon. Have a great day.